Hey, what is up? Welcome to my channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Ayla, or welcome back if you have been here before. Today what we're going to be doing is we're going to take a couple of items from my Depop pile. So a pile of clothes I was originally going to be selling on Depop and just can't be bothered with the hassle, and we're going to make them into a hat, a reversible bucket hat. So this is an idea I've had for a little while. I'm going to basically set up a business on Depop where people can send me their unwanted items, and if they're suitable, I'll make them into a reversible bucket hat for them. And then that way there's less waste, because we're remaking an item that they don't want or don't wear into something that they will wear and they will want and love. And then I can use the excess fabrics to make other items, so there will be minimal waste. I'm very excited for this, but I thought I would just show you how it works. If you're interested in making a reversible bucket hat, please follow along. This isn't really a tutorial, but I guess it is at the same time. I only figured out how to do this the other day, so bear with me. It's not perfect. I'm not perfect at sewing. I just go with the flow. So let's do this. What I'm going to do first of all, these are all of my items that I intended to sell on Depop that I now am going to sort of flip into bucket hats. And so I'm going to choose a couple of things. I do like these two here together. I like the purple and green combo, but I'm just going to get everything out and see what there is in there. As you can see, there's still a lot more stuff up there, but for now, this is what I've gotten down. So a couple of colourful pieces, a couple of like knit pieces, and I'm just going to go through and see what we choose. So I need 2 different fabrics to make one hat. Okay, so I've chosen these 2 pieces. I'll put some pictures of the screen of what the clothes usually look like. This is basically a dress from Meshki. It wasn't very expensive though. I know Meshki can be expensive, but this one was not. And also just a thrifted flannel, which was like I think £4 or £6 or something, so not too expensive either. And I don't wear this at all. I actually am thinking, because this is quite long, as you can see it's like a mini dress, I'm actually going to crop this at the top and then use the skirt fabric to make this hat, and then keep the top as a crop, and then that way I can reuse it. I might even make it just like a top so I can tuck it in, sort of thing. And then this one has quite a lot of fabric, so it's perfect. I might even get like 2 or 3 sides of a bucket hat out of this that I can combine with other things. But yeah, this is what we're going to go with today. Alright, I'm sorry, you're going to be on a bit of a slant here, but it's just the easiest way that I can sort of display everything and show everything to you. So the first thing you're going to need are some pattern pieces that you'll have to create. You don't necessarily need to download a pattern and print it out and do all of that sort of thing. And you don't necessarily need to buy one, one of the paper patterns that you can then trace onto the fabric. You can sort of create your own, which is what I did with this. You can just find some simple patterns online, but I'll give you the measurements that I used. I think I just found like a really simple tutorial. Just use those measurements, and then I made one and adjusted it. So this isn't the original pattern that I found. I did adjust it because it wasn't to my suiting. I didn't like it. The first one I made, the band was too thin, so I had to make the band thicker. So the first piece you're going to need is your top of the hat, so the bit that sits directly on the head. You'll need to cut out one of these in each of the fabrics. So you'll technically end up with 2 circles, 1 from each fabric. If you're doing it from the same fabric, just 2 from the same fabric. But if you're making a reversible hat, you will need 2 of these, 1 from each fabric. Now I'm just going to measure across the diameter of this circle. So mine ended up being about 7.5 inches, 7 3/4 inches, pretty much. But you do, as you go, that some of that gets cut off with the seam allowance. So basically what I did was I just made a little cross. I don't know if you can see that on there. So I made a little cross, measured each one 7.5, and then I just connected these as evenly as I could. As you can see, it's not a perfect circle, but you kind of make up for that as you go. The second piece you're going to need is your brim. So you have this piece that kind of goes around the brim of the hat like this. Look how cute that is. You will need 4 of these, 2 from each fabric if you're making a reversible hat. So the measurement of this edge here is 3.5 inches. And the same for the other side. The measurement of the inner curve, let's call it the inner curve, is roughly 11 inches. The pattern that I found said 12, but mine's ended up being 11. And then the outer curve, so this curve on the outside. Ended up being about 21 for me. I can't remember what it said on the original pattern, but you can sort of make it up as you go. So if you make something like this and then it doesn't work, you just adjust it on your pattern. So you make one just out of a really cheap fabric, figure out what's not working and just adjust it to you. And that's something that just comes with learning how to sew. You just learn that you just have to adapt. So that's the measurements for that piece. And then your third piece that you're going to need, it's a very simple pattern. Your third piece you're going to need is just a rectangle like this. Again, you're going to need 4 of these, 2 from each fabric, because this is the bit that will make your band, basically. So this one, the shorter sides measure 4 inches. Originally on the pattern, I think it said 3.5 and it was too thin, so I had to make it 4. And I also decreased the seam allowance for that one. And then the longer side is 12 inches, so 4 by 12 for this one. So 4 along the shorter edge and then 12 along the longer edge. So again, just to recap, you need 1 of these for each fabric, so you end up with 2 circles, 4 of these, 2 from each fabric, and then 4 of these, 2 from each fabric as well. And then you end up, once you've sewed it, with something like this, so a reversible hat, basically. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, as I said, cut that dress into sort of like a top and then use the rest of the fabric to make this piece. So I'm going to cut the pieces out and show you how I do that. Okay, so basically for this mesh key dress, first of all, it's made out of this kind of like fluffy, very stretchy fabric. Like you can see the width of it stretches a lot on this one. So basically what I'm going to do, I'm not actually going to put it on, I can't be bothered, but usually you should put it on and measure around about where I want the top to end. I've actually just relayed it to show you how I could do it to minimize waste. So I'm going to have this bit along here because it lines up with the edge. I'm just going to cut this little bit of excess, cut the bit that's kind of like elasticy here, and then have 2 pieces from that. Line this up so the only waste here is this bit at the bottom, which I have quite enough here that I can use something else. And then what I'm going to do, obviously this overlaps, but this is a seam here. So obviously what I can do is once I've cut these pieces, I can fold it out and then just cut this one piece, because obviously I don't want to cut 2 of these, that's a waste. And then where my pin is here. So this is how long I want the top to be. But then I have this whole other band here that I can use for something else. So it's good to minimize waste where you can, but I'm just going to cut these pieces out now. I've cut those 2 pieces out. As you can see, I've got 2 of each piece and I cut them together just to save time. And then for this one, we only need 1. So I've just got 1 layer down, and to kind of try and save as much fabric as possible, I've just lined it up with the curve from the inner curve of this, because that's what matches up when you sew it anyway. Okay, and then we've cut all our pieces. As you can see, they're not perfect because they're a stretch fabric as well. They do kind of warp, like this is actually stretched out more than it is. It's like kind of rolls itself up. So they don't look perfect, but they will be once they're all sewn together. I promise. It's part of the process, and obviously this is not a perfect circle, but we'll fix that as well. Now I'm just going to go ahead and cut the other pieces out from the other material. It's much easier because it's not a stretch fabric. So yes, let's do that. What I'm going to try and do with this one is use the least amount of fabric I can. Of course I try and do that with everything, but even if I can keep the top of the jacket and just crop it, would be pretty cool. Like if I can just use this fabric down here and then crop it just underneath the pockets. If not, I can always crop the pockets, like take the pockets out and sew them onto something else. But I try and save as much as possible, because then you don't have to go buy new materials, guys. You can just keep using stuff. So I'm going to try and fit the pattern pieces onto here and cut them. This has actually worked out pretty well, I think, because I need to cut 2 pieces of this, so obviously it's on the fold. And I'm not wasting very much fabric because it kind of just fits into the curve at the bottom of the flannel. And I'm going to fit this into the little nook here so that I waste the least amount of fabric possible. But of course I'm only going to cut that on one side, not both, so I still have the back piece. And then for this side I'm going to cut 2 of these as well. So let's do that. Now that we've got these beautiful pieces out of here, I'm just going to go ahead and crop this right here so that I can still keep the top. To use this like a little cropped flannel. Also, just thought I would show you, I'm obviously not trying to make it perfect, but I'm just roughly cutting along the line between this lighter bit and this darker bit so that it will be sort of roughly straight and roughly even. Also, this fabric is shedding like crazy. Like, I don't know if you can see, but it is literally everywhere, but that's fine. We move. This is just what happens. So now you're at this point. You should have 2 circles, 1 from each fabric, 4 of these rectangular pieces, 2 from each fabric, and then 4 of these curved pieces, 2 from each fabric as well. And this is all that you will need to make your bucket hat. The first thing I like to do with all of the pieces is pin them in the exact places they will be for the first step, so I'll show you that now. So the very first step you're going to want to do, and just to save time you do a couple of these at once, is you'll get your pieces right sides together. So if you haven't sewed very much before, right sides means the sides of the fabric that will be showing. So for example, this is the right side of this jumper, and then this is the wrong side. So this will be the right side. Obviously with these fabrics it doesn't matter because they're the same on both sides, but most fabrics do have a right side and a wrong side. So for these ones, what we're going to do is we line up the edges. They're not perfect. As you can see, they don't match up, but we just figure this out as we go. So you basically match them up as neatly as you can for these 2 rectangular pieces. And then you can pin them. With a lot of these fabrics, sometimes you don't even need to pin them, but it does just make it a little bit easier. So I'm just going to put 1 pin in this side. And now keeping those 2 pieces together like they are, you just go to the other side, match those as well, and then pin them also, and then repeat this with your other fabric. So you end up having a piece like this, and then we'll do the same with the other fabric that is shedding everywhere. Now what you could do is you could go ahead and sew these 2 and sew the other 2 sides of the same piece from this other material now, but what I like to do, just because it's easier, I'm already sitting here, is I'm going to get my 2 curved pieces and pin those also. So I may as well sit down, do some pinning, and then go and do all of the sewing at once for the first step anyway. So again, for this one, just on the short edges, you just match them up and pin them. And then the same for this other side as well. Before you sew it, just check it to make sure it's all lined up. What you should have is when you turn it inside out as if it had been sewn already, is you should have a circle, well that's not a perfect circle, but a circle like this. Same with the other side. The other fabric, you should have a circle like that, where they're pinned the same way. So as you can see, the seams both point out the same way. If these are opposite, you need to fix it, because you do need to sew it this way so that it's a full brim when you sew it. Same with these ones, you have your rectangular piece. When you turn it inside out as if the seams are actually there, it should be like a little circle. And then the same with the other one. Basically what we're going to go ahead and do now is everywhere where you've placed a pin, you're going to sew along here with, at the moment I usually use a 1.5 or a 1 centimeter seam allowance. I usually use 1.5 for these side bits, and when I sew the top of the hat I use a 1. So 1.5 seam allowance for these sides. So you're going to sew here and here, same on the other side, and then with the curved pieces the exact same thing. You're just going to sew along here. So no curved pieces yet, you're just sewing straight edges for the moment. So let's go do that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with the easy fabric. So you have this piece here, and we're just sewing along this edge. So what you want to do is line your fabric up. Again, I said I was going to do the 1.5 for this one. Line it up so that the needle is just at the end of the fabric, just inside the end of the fabric. And you're basically going to sew a couple of stitches like that, so 1 or 2 or 3 stitches. You're going to return, so on your machine you should have a reverse button, or if you have an electronic machine, you'll have a little reverse button on the screen, and you reverse it and you do a couple of reverse stitches. Now what this does is it just secures the thread in place. If you don't do reverse stitches, it's really easy for your thread to come undone. So it's better to be safe than sorry, you just do a few reverse stitches. And then we're just going to sew down the entire length. At this point I usually take out the pin on the stretch fabric. I'll leave it till it's closer to the needle. Never sew over your pins. You can do it if you have them in sideways, but if you have them in straight, your needle on your machine can snap, and they're a little bit more expensive to replace than just some pins, so it's easier just to take them out. And then when we get to the end, we're going to reverse stitch again just to hold it in. And then we will just snip off the edges of the thread, because you'll have this excess thread. Snip that off, and then repeat on the other side. So then what you'll have, alright, and so we have the finished piece of this one as well. Again, I can just turn it inside out, and it is the perfect circle, not perfect circle, but you know what I mean, with the seam there as well. Usually what I would recommend to do is to zigzag stitch your seams so that they don't come undone, because this is a reversible bucket hat, you're not going to see any of these, so I don't really bother. But again, that's just me being lazy. Next step, what we're going to do is, again, we've already pinned it. We can sit in our same chair and just keep sewing. It's a lot more efficient this way. Sew these edges, exact same as the other one, 1.5 seam allowance. Okay, so now you've got all of your pieces sewn, so you should have a bit of a bigger circle for the brim that is shedding all over you. I mean, this one is anyway. A bigger circle for the other brim, this one here. You're going to have your main part, I don't even know what you call this, it's like the part that goes here. And then the same for the other material. Then you should have your 2 circles. The 2 circles are going last, so we don't worry about them just yet. What we are going to do now is we're going to sew these 2 bits together. So you're going to get your brim, so your big circle, and you're going to get your little circle. So the best way that I can describe this is line up, the way that I do it is I open the seam. Most people try and iron this first. I'm lazy, so I'm not going to. And what you want to do is sew the good sides together. So remember, I said the good side is the bit that shows. So obviously on a seam like this is the good side because this is the outside of the seam, and then this is the side that's going to go inside the hat. So when I say good sides together, you want to get this seam and you want to get this seam and put them together. Obviously you're going to make it line up so that the inner part of the brim, so the smaller circle of the brim, is going to line up with the outside of this smaller circle piece. I didn't describe that very well. So it should look something like this. You have your 2 pieces, the 2 good sides go together, and I sew it like this. It is a bit of a sandwich to get through. You do have to sort of guide it through your machine because your machine can get stuck on these areas, so just be careful. But we're just going to pin all of this together. The first thing I do is I pin those seams together, and then I go around the other side and I also pin those seams together. And then you do the in-between so that if any measurements are wrong, you can sort of figure it out and manipulate the fabric rather than having to re-pin everything. And then what you should have, once you manipulate it a little bit, is you should have it looking a little bit like this. So you have the 2 pieces together, you can kind of see the circle in the middle. This is our brim bit here, and then this is our bit that goes in the middle. And then what you're going to do is you're just going to line them up. So obviously these are the 2 seams, and you can see that they line up pretty perfectly. If they don't, you can kind of manipulate the fabric to make it line up. And we're just going to pin all along the edge where we intend on sewing, because it just keeps it together, because when you're sewing, the fabric can obviously move underneath the machine, and you want it all to line up. You don't want to have any gaps or any holes or anything like that. Yes, so what you should have once you've finished pinning it is like this base of the hat. So you can see this is the body here, and then that's the brim. So you make sure that it's looking like a little mini skirt kind of. So you basically flip it back to where the pins are, and then just sew all the way around, making sure that you sew really slowly over these seams so that they sit flat, because if you sew straight over them and they get all messed up, then it doesn't look very good. Also, your machine should have this detachable part, so you can put this over the arm, which is what this is called, and then that way it just makes it so much easier to sew, because you can keep this underneath and then you make sure things don't get bunched up. Okay, and then when you're done, you will just have your skirt shape. So you just have the hole without the top, and then you have the brim of one side. I'm going to go ahead and repeat this with the other fabric. Okay, so at this point in the steps, you should have one piece with the body and then the little brim, and then the other side with the body and the little brim as well. And then you'll have 2 little circle pieces that we haven't done anything with yet, so it's their turn now. So basically what you're going to do now, get your little skirt and turn it inside out so that you have the wrong side facing outwards again. You can technically do it either way, but this is just easier. And then basically just pick any part of the circle and just pin. I usually start again just from the seam. and start pinning, and then you just pin all the way around. It's never going to be perfect because obviously I haven't measured a perfect circle. If you measure a perfect circle, it should match up pretty well, especially if you match your measurements really well also, but I don't really do that. I'm a bit lazy. So I just pin around it and try and get it to all match up, and then you have half of your bucket hat once this bit is sewn. So I'm just going to go ahead and pin all of this. And then once you've pinned it all around, you have half of a little bucket hat basically. So as you can see, you have the body here, the brim here, and then this is the circle we sewed on top. So if I turned it inside out very carefully, because obviously it's pinned, don't want to spike myself, you have half of your bucket hat. So I'm just going to go ahead and sew around this now, and then I'm going to pin and sew the other piece as well, and then we'll have 2 halves of the bucket hat ready to go. And then so I've just done the same on the other side. I've just pinned the top where it connects to the body, and I'm just going to sew all around this one as well. This one matches up a little bit easier, but because it's a stretch fabric, it's so much easier just to pull it to make it match up. So I'll show you after. Okay, so now we've got 2 halves. So we've got one side of the reversible hat and then the other side as well. So what our next step is going to be is connecting the two. So you have to sort of make them individually and then you connect them so that they're one reversible hat. So what we're going to do is turn one inside out first of all. So I've got one side inside out, one side right side out. So then what you're going to do again, like I told you before, with the right sides together, is you're going to put the right side in, you have the wrong sides outwards, if that makes sense. You're also going to want to match up the seams. So if you have the seam of this side, you want to match it up with the seam here so that it just makes it look a little bit more even. You don't have to do that, but it does just make it a bit nicer. So then what you'll have is you'll have your 2 sides like this. So again, what you're going to want to do is open the seams. Usually people will iron them, as I said before, but I am lazy. So you're going to open the seams like this and then pin. Do the same on the other side as well, so we'll do that. So again, on the other side, you just match up the seam on the innermost part, just because it's easier to sew when you do that. And then you have these 2 seams on the outside, match them up and sew the seams open. Okay, so then when you've got them connected, you want to, next to one of the seams, I mean, I choose to do it next to one of the seams, but you can do it wherever. So when I've got the seam pinned here, what you want to do is you want to put a pin here and then a pin about maybe, so you want to put a pin here next to the seam. I mean, you could put it here and here if you wanted, but it's just way easier because you're going to be hand sewing this bit. It's much easier if it's just straightened rather than the seam. So put one pin here and then one pin about this far away. So don't know what that is, maybe like 10 centimeters or something, 5. It depends. If you have a really thick fabric on both sides, you want to make sure you have a bigger space because you're going to need to turn it inside out. So you need to be able to get the whole part of the hat inside out. With these ones, because the materials are quite thin, I only need a smaller gap. So I'm going to put a pin around here and around here, and then I'll be able to turn it out this way. So you can't really see on this side because the pins are hard to see in the purple. But on this side you can see that I've got the 2 pins about this far apart, because that way it leaves me the gap to be able to turn the hat inside out, to have the right sides facing outwards. So then what you do is just past this pin, you're just going to pin all the way around the edges, connecting them together like this. They should match up pretty well because all of the bits that you cut out were the same. So you're just going to pin all the way around so that it's all connected. Alright, so then once the hat is pinned the whole way around, you'll have it looking something like this. And what you're going to want to do is start sewing at the first one, and then you finish sewing here. So I'm just going to sew from the first pin all the way around and then finish there, so I leave that gap open. Snip the threads off as always because we don't want threads dangling everywhere from the top and bottom stitch. Right, and then what you want to do is you want to take those 2 pins out that you had kind of like gatekeeping your gap. This is the exciting part because it's all come together. So you basically have a reversible hat right now, except you have the outer edges going outwards. And what you want to do is you want to open up your gap that you've made. Where is it? I've lost my gap. Here, for a second I thought I didn't have one. So you want to open up your gap and just gradually turn everything inside out. You have to be really careful here because you don't want to tear your seams. With this fabric though, it's really easy because it's all quite thin. And you just pop it through, shake it out. And then whilst you're here, pop your hand inside and just push all of the seams outwards. If you want to make it really neat, you can iron all of this, but I kind of like my bucket hats to look a little bit poofy. So I don't mind that the seams are not sort of perfectly pressed, but you can press them if you want them to be a little bit more perfect. But I kind of like my hat to be a bit floppy and like goofy looking. And then, yeah, so you can just match up. Obviously there's nothing stopping you from just going like this, just pulling everything out, which is fine. You can just push it back in. Just make sure everything kind of like lines up enough so that it doesn't look stupid. And then you're going to be left with this. Oh, there's a pin in there. Be really careful with these kind of fabrics because you cannot see your pins. So I'm just going to go through. I wouldn't do this dramatically because I could pin myself, but that's fine. So yeah, so right now this is what your hat should be looking like. You should have your one side, and you can flip it inside and push it out, and then your other side. The last thing you need to do is just hand sew this together. So if you can see, as you've got your seams, your normal seams, and then you've got these bits that are like going outwards, what you're going to do is just fold them in until they kind of roughly match up. It's never going to be perfect until they kind of roughly match up with the other seams like this. Kind of sandwich it together. And then you just pin that and just hand sew it. So tie a little knot at the end of your string. Hand sew the edges. Try and make it really small, really discreet because it is on the outside. On a material like this it's okay because it's fluffy, but on this side it might be a little bit more noticeable. So you do it very close to the edge and very kind of small stitches. Make sure there's no sort of bumps at each end. Just pin that all together like that. I'm going to do the hand stitching a little bit later, but just for effect you can kind of see here. So this is our finished hat. So basically we have this side is our fluffy purple material. As you can see, there's these like kind of bunches around. I don't worry about those. You could make it perfect if you wanted to. I could even iron all of this down, but I kind of like it to look like a bit floppy and cute. And then you can turn it inside out and you have your other side. And it's quite cute because you can kind of see the underside as well if you don't fold it entirely perfectly. So this is going to get fluff all over my hair, but I don't care. So you have your one side. So this is my fluffy side and you can see the underside here. So if you match it to your clothing, it could look super cute. And then we also have the other side. So once you hand sew that little bit, you've got your perfect little floppy bucket hat, which is reversible. Again, like I said, you can make it flat and perfect if you want to, but I really feel like one of the amazing things about creating things yourself is you can just make it how you want, and I love to just have it a little bit imperfect, a little bit unfinished, just like everyone, because we are not perfect human beings. Okay, just look at and appreciate this for one moment. So from a mini dress that I didn't really like and that wasn't flattering on me, and a huge flannel, which to be honest I actually did really like, but I just don't really wear it that often, to this. Look how freaking cute this is. Like a little, I can pull this down and wear it like with jeans and tuck it in, like it would look nice and tucked in. I've just got my workout tights on. But yeah, or I could actually pull it up as well and make it like cropped like this. How cute is that? Little crop flannel, crop shirt, and then my little reversible bucket hat. It looks better this way. I can turn it in the other way, but just with this outfit it just looks better. Looks better the other way. Look how cute this is. Ah. If you enjoyed this video, please like, leave a comment down below, and subscribe to me if you haven't already. I want to make more videos like these, creating things for you or showing you the process of creating things. And yeah, please follow my Depop as well. I'm going to be doing some upcycling on there, so I would love to see you there. See you in the next video. Bye!